You look amazing today. Thank you. So do you.
What if the person closest to you became your greatest enemy, triggering a curse that reigned through your bloodline for generations? We're diving into an ancient African tragedy where a sister's rage, fueled by a powerful arranged marriage, unleashed an unbreakable family curse. Can a family ever truly escape its fractured past?
I'm on a mission to show that our stories carry weight. My mother doubted I'd reach 500 subscribers, but your support for African Storytime Tales proves that African folktale stories have a place in everyone's hearts. Subscribe and help me keep these beautiful tales alive. Back to the video.
In the heart of the savannah, where the baobab trees stretched their ancient fingers toward the sky and the earth hummed with the secrets of 1,000 ancestors, there existed a village named Kotara. This was a place where stories lived in the wind, where every sunset carried whispers of those who came before, and where one tale refused to be forgotten, no matter how many generations tried to bury it beneath silence and shame. The story begins not with violence, not with dramatic confrontation, but with something far more insidious, the quiet poison of comparison. Two sisters, born under the same roof, nursed at the same breast, raised by the same mother's hands, Adanna and Kemi. They were like two sides of a calabash, meant to form one whole, yet destiny had carved them from different intentions. Adanna was the elder by 3 harvest seasons. She moved through life with the grace of a gazelle, her laughter like water over smooth stones. The village elders said she carried the spirit of their grandmother, the great healer who could speak to plants and make the sick rise from their sleeping mats. Her skin held the deep richness of fertile earth, and her eyes sparkled with an intelligence that made even the oldest men pause to hear her speak. She was not just beautiful, she was luminous, magnetic, the kind of presence that made others stand a little straighter when she entered a room. Kemi, the younger sister, was different. Not lesser, but different in ways that their society's cruel measuring stick could not properly value. She was clever with her hands, could weave patterns into cloth that told stories without words, could predict the rains by reading the behavior of insects. But in a world that prized certain gifts over others, her talent seemed to evaporate like morning dew under Adanna's brilliant sun. She loved her sister, how could she not? Adanna had protected her, played with her, shared secrets under the stars. But love and resentment are twins that can nurse at the same breast, growing together in the shadowed chambers of the heart. Their father was a man of modest means, a skilled craftsman whose hands could coax beauty from wood and iron. Their mother tended a garden that fed not just their family but half the village during lean times. They were respected, valued, but not powerful. Not wealthy. Not the kind of family that great chiefs noticed when choosing wives. Until the day everything changed. Chief Okonkwo ruled over 7 villages with a strength that was both feared and revered. He was a man in his prime, a warrior who had defended their lands against raiders, a leader whose granaries ensured no one starved even in drought years. His first wife had died in childbirth 2 seasons prior, and tradition demanded he take another, not just for companionship, but to secure his lineage, to produce the sons who would carry his name and his legacy forward. When his emissaries arrived at the sisters' compound, the entire village held its breath. These were men draped in the finest cloths, carrying staffs carved with the symbols of authority, speaking with voices that brooked no argument. They had come with a message from the chief himself. He had observed Adanna at the last harvest festival, had been captivated by her grace and bearing, and wished to make her his wife. The honor was staggering. Incomprehensible. A girl from their modest family, elevated to the position of a chief's wife. It would transform not just Adanna's life, but the fortune of everyone connected to her. Wealth would flow. Influence would grow. Their family's name would be spoken with reverence for generations. Adanna's reaction was not joy, but duty. She understood what this meant, the responsibility it carried. At 19 harvest, she had dreamed of choosing her own path, perhaps marrying the young teacher who made her laugh, who discussed philosophy and stories with her late into the evening. But this was not about her dreams, this was about family, honor, obligation. She accepted with the grace expected of her. Kemi's reaction was silence. A silence that screamed louder than any protest. She stood at the edge of the compound as preparations began, watching her sister being measured for ceremonial cloths, watching the village women gather to offer congratulations, watching her mother weep with pride. And inside Kemi's chest, something dark and terrible began to take root. It wasn't sudden, this transformation. It had been growing for years, fed by every comparison, every time someone said, "Why can't you be more like Adanna?" Every time she felt invisible in her sister's shadow. But this marriage, was the rain that made that poisonous seed sprout and grow wild. Why her? Kemi thought as she lay awake night after night. Why is she always chosen? Why does the world open its arms to her while I must scrape for every scrap of recognition? We share the same blood, breathe the same air, learn from the same teachers. What did the gods see in her that they couldn't see in me? The thoughts became obsessive, consuming. Kemi began to watch her sister differently, cataloging every gesture, every word, searching for the flaw that would justify her growing hatred. Because hatred it was becoming, though she dressed it in the more acceptable clothing of hurt and confusion. 3 weeks before the wedding, Kemi made a choice that would echo through time like thunder that never stops rolling. She sought out the village diviner, but not the respected elder who advised the chief. No, she traveled by night to the outskirts of their territory, to a place where the forest grew thick and the air tasted of secrets. There lived a woman named Ife, a practitioner of the old arts, the ones that walk the boundary between healing and harming, between blessing and curse. Ife's compound smelled of bitter herbs and smoke. Animal bones hung from the rafters, clicking together in a wind that seemed to blow from nowhere. The woman herself was ageless, her eyes reflecting firelight in ways that made Kemi's skin crawl, but she didn't turn back. She had come too far, descended too deep into her resentment to stop now. "I know why you're here," Ife said before Kemi could speak. The younger sister, burning with the fire of being second. "This story is older than our oldest trees." Kemi's voice shook as she spoke. "I need her to feel what I feel. I need her perfect life to crack. I need everyone to see that she's not special, not chosen, not better than me." Ife studied her with those unsettling eyes. "What you ask for has a price. Not just cowrie shells and livestock. The kind of price that compounds like interest on a debt. Are you prepared to pay what this will cost?" Kemi didn't hesitate. That was her first true mistake. Yes. The ritual took all night. Kemi provided a lock of Adanna's hair, stolen from her sleeping mat. She brought soil from the path Adanna walked most often. She spoke words that tasted like ashes on her tongue, words in a language she didn't fully understand but that seemed to resonate in her bones. And when the sun rose, weak and pale through the trees, Ife handed her a small leather pouch. "Place this beneath her sleeping mat the night before her wedding," Ife instructed. "What happens next will not be what you expect, but it will be what you have purchased with your jealousy. And remember this, child, curses are like rivers, they never flow in just one direction. They always find their way back to their source." Kemi took the pouch, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She felt powerful for the first time in her life, as if she had finally seized control of a destiny that had always seemed to favor everyone but her. The wedding preparations reached their crescendo. The compound bloomed with decorations, palm fronds woven into intricate patterns, calabashes painted with symbols of fertility and prosperity, the air thick with the scent of roasting meat and bubbling stews. Adanna moved through it all with a quiet dignity, though those who knew her well could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The night before the ceremony, while the household slept deeply, drugged by exhaustion and palm wine, Kemi crept to her sister's mat. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain it would wake everyone. She slipped the leather pouch beneath the woven reeds, her fingers brushing against Adanna's sleeping form. For just a moment, she hesitated. Her sister's face in sleep looked so peaceful, so vulnerable. A memory flashed, Adanna, 12 years old, defending 6-year-old Kemi from older children who had mocked her. Adanna sharing her portions of food when times were lean. Adanna braiding her hair and telling her she was beautiful in her own unique way. But resentment is a poison that distorts memory, that transforms love into something twisted and unrecognizable. Kemi pushed the pouch fully into place and retreated to her own mat, where she lay awake until dawn, her stomach churning with anticipation and dread. The wedding day arrived with skies so blue they seemed unreal. But as the sun climbed higher, something began to go wrong. Adanna woke with a fever that made her skin burn to the touch. The village healer came, pressed herbs to her forehead, muttered prayers, but the fever only climbed higher. By midday, when she should have been dressed in her bridal finery, Adanna was delirious, speaking to people who weren't there, her body convulsing with seizures that terrified everyone who witnessed them. The wedding was postponed. Chief Okonkwo, concerned and confused, sent his own healers. They tried everything, bitter teas, spiritual cleansings, sacrifices to the ancestors. Nothing worked. Adanna's condition worsened. Her beautiful skin became mottled with strange marks. Her hair began to fall out in clumps. Her eyes, when she was lucid enough to open them, held a terror that made her mother weep. And then the dreams began. Not just for Adanna, but for the entire family. Nightmares so vivid they felt more real than waking life. In these dreams, a woman with no face stood at the foot of their mats, pointing an accusing finger, her mouth open in a silent scream. They dreamed of rivers running with blood, of crops withering in the field, of children born with twisted limbs. The village elders convened. This was not natural illness, this was spiritual attack. Someone had cursed the bride. But who would dare such a thing? What enemy did their family have who would risk the wrath of the chief and the community? Kemi watched it all unfold with growing horror. This wasn't what she had wanted. She had imagined Adanna being humiliated, perhaps embarrassed at the ceremony, maybe having the engagement broken. She hadn't wanted this suffering, this agony. She hadn't wanted to see her sister waste away, to hear her mother's sobs through the thin walls, to watch her father age 10 years in 10 days. She tried to retrieve the pouch, sneaking to Adanna's mat one night, but it was gone. Dissolved, perhaps, or absorbed into whatever dark magic Ife had woven. There was no undoing what she had done. 3 months passed. Adanna survived, but she was transformed. The fever broke, the convulsions stopped, but she was a shadow of herself. Her beauty was gone, not in the superficial sense, but deeper, the light that had made her luminous had been extinguished. She moved like a ghost through the compound, speaking rarely, her eyes distant and haunted. Chief Okonkwo, a man of honor but also of practicality, withdrew his marriage proposal. He couldn't take a wife who seemed touched by dark spirits, who might bring whatever curse afflicted her into his household. The loss of face for Adanna's family was catastrophic. Neighbors who had celebrated with them now whispered behind their hands. Opportunities that had seemed certain evaporated like morning mist. And the dreams didn't stop. They spread like disease through the family line. Adanna's father became paranoid, convinced enemies lurked in every shadow. Her mother developed a tremor in her hands that never ceased. And Kemi Kemi began to understand what Ife had meant about curses flowing in multiple directions. She started having visions. Waking visions where she saw herself rotting from the inside out, where her reflection in water showed a monster instead of a woman. Food turned to ash in her mouth. Sleep became impossible without nightmares. And slowly, inevitably, she began to waste away just as her sister had, consumed by guilt and the dark magic she had unleashed. In her desperation, she confessed. On a night when the pain became unbearable, when she thought she might not survive until morning, Kemi crawled to her sister's mat and told her everything. The jealousy, the journey to Ife, the pouch, all of it spilled out between sobs and gasps for air. Adanna listened in silence. When Kemi finished, expecting rage or hatred, her sister simply said, "I know. I've known since the fever started. The spirits told me in my dreams." "Then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you have me punished?" "Because you're my sister. Because I loved you. Because I thought if I said nothing, if I bore it silently, perhaps the curse would be satisfied and leave you alone. I was wrong. That conversation should have been the end, but curses don't work that way. Confession doesn't cleanse them. Forgiveness doesn't dissolve them." The magic Kemi had purchased was older and more powerful than either sister understood, and it had embedded itself into their bloodline like a parasite. Both sisters died young. Adanna never married, never bore children, lived out her shortened days in quiet solitude. Kemi lasted even less time, her guilt consuming her more efficiently than any disease. But the curse didn't die with them. It passed to their brother's children, manifesting differently but no less destructively. One generation saw siblings turn against each other with inexplicable hatred, families torn apart by conflicts that seemed to arise from nowhere. The next experienced a plague of stillbirths and infant deaths that defied all medical explanation. Another saw madness descend on the firstborn daughters, a madness that looked remarkably like the delirium Adanna had suffered. The family began keeping records, trying to trace the pattern, to understand what was happening. Elders told the story of Adanna and Kemi, though details changed with each telling, becoming more myth than history. Some versions claimed Adanna had provoked Kemi's jealousy deliberately. Others insisted the chief himself had cursed the family for wasting his time. But those who listened carefully to the oldest voices, who paid attention to the details that remained consistent across generations, knew the truth. This curse was born of a sister's betrayal, fed by jealousy and rage, and it would not release its grip easily. 7 generations passed, each one bearing some mark of that ancient sin. The family scattered, hoping distance would break the connection, but geography proved irrelevant to spiritual bondage. A daughter in the east would dream of her ancestors' betrayal. A son in the north would wake screaming about women with no faces. The curse was patient, creative, adapting to each new generation while maintaining its essential hunger. By the 8th generation, the family had dwindled. Many lines had died out entirely, unable to survive the compounding tragedies. Those who remained were tired, worn down by a legacy they had never asked for, punished for a crime committed by ancestors they had never known. But exhaustion can sometimes breed clarity, and desperation can open doors that comfort keeps locked. A woman named Amora, a direct descendant of Adanna and Kemi's brother, decided enough was enough. She was a teacher, educated in both traditional ways and modern methods, someone who believed that understanding was the first step toward liberation. She began researching her family history with scholarly precision, interviewing elders, consulting diviners, reading every scrap of written record she could find. What she discovered was both horrifying and illuminating. The curse wasn't just about punishment, it was about unfinished business, about pain that had never been properly acknowledged, about a betrayal that had never been truly reconciled. Kemi's confession had been extracted by suffering, not offered from genuine remorse. Adanna's forgiveness had been given out of love, yes, but also from exhaustion and defeat, not from a place of healed wholeness. Amora traveled to the place where Ife had once lived, now long abandoned but still humming with residual energy. She made offerings to the ancestors, not asking for forgiveness but offering acknowledgement. She spoke aloud the full truth of what had happened, naming both Kemi's jealousy and the society that had created the conditions for such jealousy to flourish. She acknowledged Adanna's suffering and also the suffering of all who came after, innocents caught in a web not of their making. And then she did something unprecedented, she forgave them both. Not on behalf of the curse's victims, but on behalf of herself. She released her anger at ancestors who had burdened her with this legacy. She let go of her resentment at the unfairness of being punished for another sin. She chose, consciously and deliberately, to break the cycle of blame and recrimination that had fed the curse for generations. The change wasn't immediate or dramatic. There were no thunderclaps, no visions of liberation. But slowly, carefully, the family began to heal. The nightmares decreased in frequency and intensity. Children were born healthy and remained that way. Siblings who had been estranged for years found themselves able to communicate again. It was as if a weight that no one had fully registered was gradually being lifted. Amora taught her children the full story, not a sanitized version, not a myth, but the messy, painful truth. She taught them that jealousy is a human emotion, understandable even when it leads to terrible places. She taught them that betrayal can have consequences that outlive the betrayer. But most importantly, she taught them that healing is possible when we are willing to face the truth fully, to acknowledge pain without being consumed by it, to forgive without forgetting. The curse may never be fully broken. Some believe that magic that old and that powerful never completely releases its grip. But its power has been diminished, its teeth dulled. The family still carries the story, but now as a lesson rather than a sentence. They speak of Adanna and Kemi not with shame but with honest recognition of their humanity, their flaws, their capacity for both love and destruction. In the villages where the story is still told, it serves as a reminder that our actions ripple outward in ways we cannot fully predict or control. That jealousy, left unchecked, can poison not just our own lives but the lives of those who come after us. That betrayal between those who should love each other carries a weight that time alone cannot lift. But also that healing is possible, that cycles can be broken, that we are not forever bound by the worst choices of our ancestors. What happened between those two sisters under the African sky so many generations ago was a tragedy, a perfect storm of social pressure, human emotion, and dark magic. But what has happened since is a testament to resilience, to the power of truth-telling, to the possibility of redemption across generations. Sometimes the greatest curse is not what others do to us, but what we do to ourselves in response. And sometimes the greatest healing comes not from erasing the past, but from finally understanding it clearly enough to step into a different future. The choice, as it always has been, lies with us.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more inspiring stories. See you next time.